Thanks for joining us. My name is Ibrahim Sani. There's a rather alarming statistics that has been produced by Silverlake Access and IDC in that digital banking CAPEX spending by bank has dropped from 70% back in 2015 to now 5%. So now the question is, has banks migrated enough in the digital banking landscape? What's next for the banking industry? And more. Joining us on my left is Andrew Tan, the Group MD of Silverlake Access Limited. Andrew, thanks very much for taking the time to speak with us. Let's do a little bit of background in terms of what Silverlake does before we jump into the whole conversation of the banking industry.
Okay, thank you, Ibrahim, for having me here. Silverlake Access, we are a company of about having been around for 35 years. So we are a Malaysian company, but we are listed in the Singapore Stock Exchange and has been so for the last 20 years. We have offices in 16 countries, 25 offices, and essentially we are an enterprise software technology firm providing solutions, services to all sorts of enterprises, although 60% of what we do are for the banking sector. So as an example, in the Southeast Asia space, 40% of the top 20 banks, they use our solutions. So if every day you count the number of transactions, banking transactions, that goes through the core banking platform, there will be roughly about 700 million transactions that goes through, our solutions. So we are quite dominant, here in this part of the world. Although we also are global. In Pakistan alone, 70% of the credit card transactions also run through our systems. We are also in other sectors outside of banking, but also like in the insurance side, we do e-claims processing. In Malaysia, we have almost 100% of the insurance companies who are on our platform. 50%, Singapore, in the Philippines and Indonesia are on our platform. So we are quite an established organization, with about 2,000 people around the world.
How did you get into the banking industry? Because back 35 years ago, core banking transaction might not necessarily be a primary focus for IT companies to do.
Yeah.
What drove Silverlake Access into this sector?
I think 35 years ago, if you look at the Asia Pacific part of the world, there has been a lot of transformation, within the banking industry.
This is in the 80s.
In the 80s, exactly. I mean, if you look at a country like Indonesia, when they open up, and they have got several hundred banks, and they're going through a period of growth, period of consolidation, and a lot of banks are modernizing. I think in those days, they were all rushing to open up branches. Even Malaysia, similarly, there were many banks, and all of them, wanted to capture, a larger slice of the market. So they need to modernize the technologies, because back then there were not very many offerings, on the table. A lot of them are essentially, from the mainframe, kind of environment. So I think, we were quite well positioned in the sense that we managed to bring a solutions, that provided them with the flexibility, provided them with the ability, to look at, the entire portfolio of customers and be able to anticipate what the needs are, and go to market. Plus also the fact that, the providers are mainly multinational players. So we are one of the few, Asian players. So we were, kind of, ahead of the curve in terms of providing solutions that clearly, that can resonate with our clients in this part of the world.
How I would like to describe the financial sector, not just banking in Malaysia, is that there are two graphs in my mind right now. The first is a J curve in terms of transactions. When it comes to timeline, some years ago compared to today, there's a lot of transactions. And if I were to put my thinking hat on, the transactions are just going to grow in the future. That is in terms of the transaction. In terms of players, however, there seems to be a waxing and waning. There was a time, maybe you can tell me, because you've been around for far longer than I have. The players were out of control, I suppose, the number of players, to a point where it became necessary for the central bank to discuss with the players, existing players, to amalgamate some of the players. We're looking at the noughties, we're looking at the 90s, to a point where the commercial banks have now, I guess, reached a saturated period. And development banks, for instance, have also amalgamated. In fact, there's one now between MREF, MBSB and the likes. But so it's widening and then it's narrowing, and now it's widening again, but not in the sense of a traditional banking player, We're looking at e-wallets. We're looking at digital banks now coming to play. So how do you reconcile the number of entities and institutions versus the ever-increasing number of transactions that's going to happen in the future to come?
Well, I mean, let's not call it the banking industry. Let's call it the financial services industry, right? I think the distinction between banking and non-financial services entities, is becoming blurrer and blurrer. I think with the advent of digitalization and the coming in of very agile fintech type players, so it's kind of becoming a play where they need to coexist together. But I think at the end of the day, what you will see is that because there are all kinds of new transactions apart from just going to the bank and deposit a banking transaction or withdraw money from ATM or go online banking. Now you got all sorts. I think the volume definitely has increased. With the likes of the easy way that you can do payments in the world. So I think e-payments actually contributed to a large part of the transaction. The volumes have definitely gone up.
And not just the big volumes. It's also the microtransactions.
Exactly.
You can buy a can of Coke, 2-3 ringgit, and you pay QR. That has to be captured somewhere, right?
Yes.
So what does it mean in the joint report that the International Data Corporation, or IDC, and Silverlake is doing, that shows that banking the investment or capex into digital banking has dropped from 70% just 8 years ago to 5% this year? Does it mean that financial institutions are not looking into this kind of space any longer, or is there something else?
I think they are definitely looking into it. I think they are looking at broadening the customer base. That's for sure. And I think the segment which is what I call the lower tier customer segments are in many ways the segments the banks want to get back into. But what they need to do is a few things. They need to create products that are more that can resonate with the space. And like you say it could be in micro lending, right? It could be lending in the hundreds of ringgits as opposed to the thousands of ringgit. So they need to create that kind of ability. But at the same time, in terms of assessing the risk, also becomes different. I wouldn't say that they are not investing in it. I would say that it is a totally different ball game that they need to get into, because that's a space where the fintechs have naturally affiliated themselves to, and I think banks are figuring out how they can get into the space, and they are investing in digitalization. I think more and more the shift of the investments are away from the traditional core banking to more on areas with the use of analytics, with the use of artificial intelligence and applications that can help them be more agile to come up with applications that can really roll out and get customers where from a point of contact, like let's say getting them to be interested in a loan, to a point where they can actually disperse money. I mean, you can do it as quick now with a lot of banks in 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah, but the report also shows that core banking transactions, about 40% of them have failed or completely stopped.
You're absolutely right.
So what does that mean?
Absolutely right. We're absolutely right. See,
just to regurgitate, the report further revealed that approximately 40% of core banking transactions have either failed or stopped completely, marked by overruns in budget and under-delivering of expectations or scope.
Right. The biggest decision, or not so much of a decision, but the biggest priority in a bank, as opposed to 35 years ago now, the biggest priority is not in changing the core, because I think most of the banks know that changing the core banking platform is a very complex exercise.
Now, as part of CIMB, it was really messy. I think
Silverlake
was your client.
Correct, yes.
It is an impossible task.
Yeah, but we did it.
Legacy.
We did it.
Legacy issues, different entities merged, cross-border problems. I'm not just talking about Bank Bumi, CIMB Southern Bank issues. I'm talking about Niaga and Bank Lipo. It was just a mess.
Yeah.
But yes, you did it.
I think at the end of the day, while the percentages of failures are high, I think at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that it cannot be done, successfully. I think it's all about how we scoped it. It's all about
But
getting the right
the
partners
conversation
in.
then was like, why are we doing this? Why don't we just start anew and run with that and just migrate everything there? It's a lot easier, simpler, quicker, faster, cheaper.
Well, I guess in many bank situations, when they make the critical decision, to embark, on a new core banking platform, I mean, they have to do it, with, very deep foresight about what they want to do in terms of getting the ROI. I mean, examples of banks like, let's say UOB or OCBC or, even CIMB or Bank Rakyat Indonesia, Bank Rakyat Indonesia or Bank Mandiri, they're all our customers, and they have been our customers, for a very long time. And I think, the impetus for them to change, has been, a variety of reasons, because the old core is just not doing the job, where they were. But they do realize that making the change, is not going to be easy. So what they have to do is to make sure that, the people that they work with, the vendor that they partner with, our vendors' reputation and proven background, that they can get the job done. Like I said, we have been in the business for 35 years. We have got 300 banking clients around the world, and I can say, with pride, that we have successfully converted all our clients to our platform from all sorts of, different platforms.
Right. That's another way of corporations, especially financial institutions, want to move ahead, is to partner with small, nimble fintech players, insurtech players, and see how they can migrate some of these smaller players' technology into their larger core banking transaction or platforms. What's the story from that angle? I mean, we've talked about the core banking transaction and transformation, which is a mammoth task, but a lot of companies and banks have done it. What about this whole plug and play idea, where you look at the sandbox, go to SC by SC, for instance, see what suits your requirement, and then just partner them?
Yeah, I think the landscape has changed a lot, up to now. I mean, as I said before, the priorities for bank to totally change the core banking, is not the top priority. I think the top priority is, like you said, there's a lot of all these fintech companies out there. There's a lot of new ways to engage the customers. Customers are also, demanding that the banks, deal with them, operate with them differently, competition, etc., etc., etc. So it's come to a world where the banks are finding that they need to coexist. And the banks are finding that, in many cases, they find that, their core platform is actually inhibiting them from doing so. So this is where, cloud, comes about, right? And with the advent of cloud, banks are able to actually do a lot of the leapfrogging, because in many ways, cloud, first and foremost, I think from an economic perspective, offers the most flexible and economic way, of allowing banks to embark on what I call experimentation, right? And it is inevitable. All the fintechs are all riding on.
But all regulators, especially Bank Negara, allows for experimentation to happen. They have a sandbox, see what goes there.
There are regulations. There are compliance related initiatives which you just have got to make sure that you comply. But I think the shift, from the traditional way of providing banking applications, a more agile way that actually works on the cloud, it's happening. It's happening.
I mean, nobody's going to dispute that cloud migration is a non-critical factor. It is a critical factor.
Absolutely.
Let's look at how financial institutions or any other organizations out there, because you do serve outside of the banking sector as well. So how the shops are arranged. When you have 5 roles overlapping and people can't really define what the differences are, for instance, Chief Technology Officer, Chief Information Officer, Chief Intelligence Officer, Chief Data Officer, Chief Analytics Officer, and then when you ask the 5 of them what's the difference between one another, they all fumble. I mean, if you ask a CEO and a CFO, what's your role? They can easily say, oh, I'm counting the beans, he's doing the business. Done. Simple.
Yeah. Okay.
But you have these 5 roles, some of them are there, some of them are there, and then you wonder, and then you're a vendor or whatever, you try to, and then the app fails, who do you complain to? It's a bizarre moment.
Yeah.
So how do you resolve that kind of, I'm sure you're facing this kind of thing.
You are right in the sense, although I've not seen a bank that got so many individuals, occupying all of these roles. A lot of them actually have several roles, in the portfolio. But I think, at the end of the day, those roles, however you want to put it organizationally, are required, if you want to succeed, in the future. Whether it is on the digital side, whether it is on the analytics side, so on and so forth. I think at the end of the day, I think the bank must have a clear strategy, right? To move forward to the future. I mean,
I know they're your clients. I'm less optimistic.
Well,
if you look at the cost to income ratio, banks are rising.
You're right.
If you look at the ROI, they're decreasing. ROE, sorry.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think the biggest concern in any bank is to, how to reduce the cost to income ratio, right? I mean, that's one of the biggest concerns. That's on the cost side. But I think on the other side, they have the other concern as to how to increase the engagement with customers. So it's a two sides that they need to balance.
It's not capturing ROE.
There's a two things they need to balance. And I think definitely the cloud technologies, definitely if you do it right, gives you a lot of avenue, to reduce the cost.
Okay, let's talk about that.
If you do it right.
Let's talk about that. So what would be the things that would constitute to doing it right using cloud? Well,
I mean, a clear example. It's very clear, right? I mean, if you're not on cloud, you're owning all the capex of all the infrastructure that you have right now on your own, right? Cloud is a shared resource environment. Definitely, if your mind is oriented, to that shared resource environment, definitely it's going to cut down, in fact, on your capex.
What is the thinking right now among the industry?
I think the thinking is that it clearly provides the benefit.
Anybody militantly opposing this whole idea?
Well, I think there are resistance. I think a lot of the resistance is more in terms of understanding what they need to give up. The huge investments they make, currently on the current infrastructure, and what does it mean, when you're on the other side, and what about security? How secure is it? What would the regulators say, if I enter in a long-term, arrangement, with a cloud provider, and all the applications I've invested and built, if I were to move it there, what are the implications? What kind of disruptions, is going to cause, and is it going to work?
Okay, that is in the element of taking off the capex element when you go to cloud. Another area of exploration that you can share with us in doing it right?
Well, if you do it right, you definitely, the way you develop applications on the cloud, is very different from when you're on the premise. There are all sorts of tool sets that you can use, that's an agile development approach. As an example, in the old days, it could take you up to 2 years to build something. If you use an agile approach,
the market doesn't have time for that.
Exactly. So, the whole idea of being on cloud, to use the agile development approach, is to use what we call the minimum viable product approach, right? You want to roll out things in an iterative way. So you launch it, you see, see the return ROI. If it's not there, you ditch it. Then you start another way. Exactly. So you have to leverage cloud, to do something like that. So that is more from, the market, the customer side, and also I think more importantly on the cloud is that, you could scale, right? Rather than one shot, you buy all the expensive infrastructure, and there's going to be a lot of excess capacity that you don't use on low demand. When you're on the cloud, you can scale it up and down.
Sorry,
On high
and-
demand, you pay more.
And it's 2023. I thought we are past this whole conversation of cloud migration and the benefits of cloud.
Right.
Why are we still talking about this right now? Do you feel that the market is still, there's a lot of holdout in terms of adopting this right now?
I don't think there is that tremendous holdout. I think if you talk to
So we should be
every
discussing
single
about
bank,
AI. We should be discussing about automation, about Industry 4.0. That is the conversation that we should be talking about, not just not about the infrastructure. The infrastructure is just assume everything is on
you're
cloud
right.
already.
You're right. I think, like I said, I mean, banks by tendency, they are conservative, but
And they will lose out to faster players.
They will. But definitely, the cloud discussion is sky high, on their agenda. So different banks take different approaches, right? Some are more aggressive, some are less aggressive. I think it's all about cost, risk, and skills and talent. That's another big factor you need to put into the
There's
equation.
also the philosophy that permeates across the organization. If you have folks, I'm not talking about biological age. I'm talking about thinking, mentality, and philosophy. If you have an old-fashioned thinking, you can be 21 and have an old-fashioned thinking mentality. You can be 65 and be forward-thinking. The philosophy behind this industry is that's why people keep on saying, like what you just literally said, banking is by nature conservative. That is why banking will lose out, the way I put it.
Yeah. You'll be amazed, what banks are doing now, to change the culture in the bank. So, a lot of banks are setting up banks within the bank. Like, as an example, I'm not kidding. I mean, it's not like a different bank, it's like setting up a different operating unit. Just to tender, to all this new age, kind of banking and getting the new segments.
And they follow a completely different branding. I can mention a few.
Yes,
but
some of them do that
let's
too.
not give them free branding.
We have been working with, some of those banks, different brands, even right down to setting up different legal entities.
And
all
you
the
are
different
with
boards.
them every step of the way.
We are with them every step
So
of the way.
how is it turning out in terms of some
I
of these
think,
bank within bank?
Yeah, I mean, just an example of an engagement, that we did in Thailand. I mean, they are the big behemoth, bank, right? One of the top banks.
Yes.
And because of the strong legacy, culture, it's very difficult for them to leapfrog, into the future. So they decided to launch themselves in the digital world by setting up what they call monoline banking. So it's essentially saying, look, this is a new target segment, micro lending, right? I'm going to have a new CEO. I'm going to have a new board of directors. You go and make a decision, on how you want to go about running it.
So there's a high level of autonomy.
It's high level autonomy. Then they need to look for, the platform and technologies that can allow them to do that. While at the same time, and this is the trickiest part, is that having your own autonomy doesn't mean, that your wall is completely separated.
Yeah.
Right? Because at the end of the day, you're still one bank.
Yeah.
So the technology must be smart enough to be able to talk, to your old technology so that everything, works out well.
Because customer experience will be very, very poor.
Correct.
If the bank within a bank ask me the same kind of New York customer kind of thing, and I'm like, why would I? I'm already part of the bank.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
the key part here is that, because we're running out of time, but the key part here is that the banking industry, financial sector is actually quite crucial for us to move ahead. We need them to survive, and not just that, we need them to thrive in order for us to be productive as well. The times are very critical right now when it comes to trying to build the economy, personal wealth, many more. Do you feel that the banks have the wherewithal to ensure that they can deliver the necessary products to the market to a point where people can see that banking industry is actually up to date and up to speed with what is required right now?
Well, I mean, banks for many, many years, right from the days of ATM to online banking, they've always been in the forefront of technology. And I've got no doubt, that this time through, they will, be at the forefront, right? I mean, some may see that they are not operating fast enough, but I can tell you, a lot of banks are putting a lot of emphasis, to do that transformational, leap. Some are faster, some are slower, some are taking different strategies.
Normal.
I think, I think they'll get there. I think a lot of the impetus is driven by what the customer wants. A lot of the impetus is driven by everybody's on the cloud. If I'm not on the cloud, how how am I going to
amalgamate
together and work together the fintechs, etc., etc., etc. So that move is inevitable, right? And I think for banks, if they do it well and they do it smartly, what's the biggest advantage of being a bank to be in that fintech space? I think if they do it well, they will be the best players to compete with all others, including
they will
digital banks.
They will crush the players.
Don't forget, when customers talk about banking, reputation, brand is very important.
Yeah, of course.
So the conventional banks have it.
I would think twice, trying to go for a small,
Exactly.
as opposed to oil tanker kind of bank,
So banks, so the conventional banks are not, are not sitting around doing nothing. They are doing a lot of stuff. Yeah.
I'm sure, but the question is, it's not easy to turn an oil tanker to another direction. But when it does, it's unstoppable. It's behemoth.
It's unstoppable. It will,
but that turning,
it will go. That turning, yeah. It's a question of speed, right?
Fantastic. Okay, very quickly, final comments on this industry and perhaps your company.
Well, like I said, I think the industry is an exciting one. And I think the technology side of financial services is always a growing industry, particularly in our part of the world. Notwithstanding that we are not 100% insulated from what's happening outside of our region, but very excited by what's happening in the world. We are also in our own company reinventing ourselves. We actually carry 3 core banking platforms. There are, for different markets. And we're putting everything onto the cloud, right? But I think the more important thing is that because we have got such a long history of engagement with banks, so we know the pains that they're going through.
Of course.
Yeah, and we are able to offer them, scenarios and options on how to get them to transform in the most
efficient,
risk managed way. I think banks are very fearful of engaging on things.
Rightfully so, because I keep my money there. I want them to be a little bit more conservative than me. Okay, fantastic. That was Andrew Tan, the Group MD of Silverlake. You can learn more about their company at their website. Also, there's a lot of resources that can be found here on Astro AWANI. Do check out Niaga AWANI on all our resources there as well. My name is Ibrahim Sani. Catch you in the next one.